I'm Dr. Liz Stafford, and this is Primary Music in Conversation. My guest for this episode is David Gray from Barton Hill Academy, a three-form entry primary school in Devon, part of the Lift Schools Multi-Academy Trust. David has been music specialist at that school for 10 years now and is also music network lead for the trust. You may also know him from the YouTube channel Music with Mr. Gray. I know we're going to have a fascinating conversation, and I'm really delighted to welcome him to Primary Music in Conversation. So welcome to the podcast, David. It'd be great if you could just introduce yourself a little bit for our listeners so they know who you are and where you're from.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. My name is David Gray. I am a primary music teacher. I teach in the Southwest in a three-form primary school, and I deliver the music curriculum from nursery all the way up to year six. Previously, a self-employed freelance teacher for quite a while, did a PGC in secondary music, didn't like teenagers much, so went back to primary, and I've been doing it for 10 years.
Fantastic. I'm with you on the teenagers. I have one living in the house at the moment. She's not as nice as she was when she was small. She's still a lovely individual, but
Of
it's not
course.
quite the same vibe. I'm definitely with you. Primary all the way. So, I think we'll just start by finding out a little bit about, how you do music in your school, how it's going, and how you, just what you're doing in terms of delivery at the moment.
I think like most schools or most teachers in my position, I tend to cover PPA. So PPA cover, I'll step in and I'll deliver the music to each class in the morning or an afternoon. As I said, I teach from nursery all the way up to year six. We are in a fortunate position in that we're well funded, we're well supported by the head. I have a lovely big classroom as well, which is really nice, which means that I can deliver not just a standard music curriculum, but I can go that little bit above and beyond with instrumental tuition as well. I'm a multi-instrumentalist. I don't play everything, but I play quite a few instruments. But it just means that rather than paying an outside, agency to come and deliver whole class instrumental teaching, I can do that. So I like to think our children get a wide range of opportunities um, in their time at primary school.
Fantastic. And like, if you don't mind me asking, how is your sort of timetable split if you're doing the kind of instrumental stuff as well? Sort of how much time are you spending with each class and how does that all work?
Well, it's part of the timetable, so just depending on what year group they are, what stage. Some lessons might be topic based, some lessons will just be, musical, exploring different types of music, composing, and all those kind of things. And then other year groups, so for example, our year fours, they will spend a year learning how to play an instrument, whether it's violin, trumpet, or a woodwind instrument. And obviously, within that time, yes, the majority is spent on their instruments, but of course, they're still developing all those music reading skills and listening skills. So it's all encompassed into that curriculum.
Hmm. And you mentioned quite a few different instruments there. So for year fours, I'm interested because you're three form entries, like each form doing a different instrument. Is that how it's
Yeah,
working?
so we're lucky enough again to have either in-house instruments or instruments hired by our local hub, which means that no instruments, especially in year four, are being shared, especially for hygiene and things like that. So the brass class learning brass instruments, for example, that one child will have that one instrument for the entire year. And then other instruments like, we have class sets of ukuleles which are shared. But again, we have enough recorders for our year twos to have one per child and they're clean. So again, yeah, we're in a fortunate position where we've got the number of instruments to be able to do that.
That's amazing. I'm sure loads of our listeners will be really jealous hearing that. Um, I'm just going back to year four because this is fascinating to me. Going back to the year four, so you kind of whole, I guess, just sort of whole class instrumental program essentially in year four, isn't it? Do you do you ever get um any of the classes like going, oh no, I wanted to be the one that's got learnt to learn the violin, but I've got to learn the trumpet? And like, how do you navigate that if that happens?
Funny enough, that literally happened today when we had an orchestra come and visit, which was a lovely day, and we were talking a bit about it in the lesson. And then one of them did say, "Oh, so how come they got to do the violin and we got to do this?" And there's some elements that will affect that. So we actually have a child in the school with a physical disability, which meant that a particular instrument was just not going to be viable for that class. So in that case, it was quite easy to choose. But I will have because I watch them grow up and I teach them as they grow up, and I will figure out some children will kind of nudge, oh, I like to try this instrument. So there have been cases where I know a child in year three has taken an interest in a violin, for example, and I've given that class the violin, for the year. But apart from that, there's no other a name out of a hat. Yeah. I think that, they're not too bad. They realize that they're lucky to have, an instrument for a year that they can learn to play. So no, I don't get too many upset children.
Oh, that's good. That's fantastic. And is there opportunity for them to continue with the instrument, like in small group or one to one or anything afterwards?
So this is where things get tricky. Like in our school, we're a high pupil premium, over 60 percent. So the idea of paying for a music lesson for a lot of families is just not viable at all. It's not on their radar. It's not something that they would have the spare money for, which is why we try to do as much as we can in the school, in the curriculum, give them all the opportunities we can possibly shove into 7 years, because for a lot of those children, they probably won't get the opportunity to then go on and learn it, if it was paid for. But in saying that, we do ensure that there are opportunities. So we have local music groups that they can go to after school, that do run, extracurricular. We do have teachers that come in, so those families who can afford it, the options are there. And I try my best with trying out different after school clubs to kind of suit those needs as well, which changes. It changes all the time. And one of my plans for next year is to have a orchestra of sorts. I might not call it an orchestra, but with those different types of instruments. But yeah, each year can vary, and it's hearing from the children what their interests are, and yeah, and if there is a huge interest in a particular instrument that they probably couldn't afford to play, then I'll see, I'll try my best to give them that chance.
Oh, it's fantastic. It sounds like you're really well resourced. You've got a really supportive head teacher, you've got the budget and everything, and you're doing, it sounds like a fantastic job. But as you say, at some points, somebody somewhere's got to pay, haven't they, if children want to carry
Yeah.
on with their musical experiences, and that's just kind of a fact of life, I suppose,
It
really.
is, and it's not just money, it's time as well. My time is literally taken up, with the curriculum. I'm lucky that I've got 2 afternoons in which we can have a choir, which is lovely. But I don't do a club every night of the week. I don't have the time or the not the patience, but the certainly got the patience, just the energy to do it. I'm starting at 8:45 in the morning, going all day, and it's a lot to fit in. But I think the children probably, I don't know what other schools are like, but I think that our children are probably getting more music within their time just in the school day than perhaps other children are.
That's really, really good to hear. I guess, music's such teaching's tiring anyway, but music is like so much more physical than teaching other subjects, isn't it? And I think people don't quite get that if you're doing music all day, like you come away with a headache and ringing ears and you're knackered, and like the thought of then trying to do an after school club every night is just, yeah, a little bit too far. You mentioned your choirs in the afternoons. Are they in curriculum time, your choirs?
Yeah, so again, one of the problems we've had is trying to find the time for a choir to get the numbers. So I've tried it after school, just not big enough numbers. We tried it in morning, didn't work out particularly well. So this year we trialed 2:30 to 3 o'clock, We run two choirs. We're big schools. We have three, four, and five and six, and it's been amazing. So it's within the curriculum time. Teachers will allow those children who are interested to come, and yeah, I'd say we've got about 60 in each choir. And it's purely because of the timing of the day. Again, our head is supportive and she's allowed us to use that time, and I think it's time well spent as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely, that's amazing. I suppose, is there any advice you might give to other schools about how to broach that conversation with their SLT if they're, looking at a choir that's got dwindling numbers or looking at a choir where they could do much more with it? How you convince SLT to put aside that time within the
Oh,
curriculum?
that's a tricky one because I've never had to convince.
Mm.
Again, I'm lucky I'm in the supportive position in which, our SLT will always give something a go. If it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. But I think we've seen the success immediately within the year of just having that choir at that time. It hasn't really affected the learning elsewhere in the school. We've certainly had no complaints. But I think it's just broaching the conversation in the first place, and hopefully having an SLT that are happy to give things a go. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But yeah, just having that open conversation.
And certainly from your experience, it sounds like it's been transformational, really.
Yeah, and it has taken. I'm in my 10th year. It's only in the last couple of years that the choir's really taken off. We've always had them, but they've been smaller. They've been for particular occasions. But now we've just got something regular that children will grow up with. I think that's the difference as well. So when year four go into year five, they know that they can continue in the choir. It will still be at 2:30. It might be on a different day, but it's just something that is part of their weekly routine.
Yeah, absolutely. And so instrumental wise, you said you've got a plan for maybe an orchestra at some point. Have you got other ensemble provision for instruments at the moment, or clubs or anything, or is that something you're working towards?
Again, we've tried lots of different things in the past. I've run guitar clubs. We've had them. We have teachers coming in now, so we're starting to see that be replaced. But again, I'm constantly reviewing things. Where I've had a ukulele club all year, simply because I teach ukulele in year three, and then the children who want to continue, the opportunities there. We have recorders in year two, so we tried to do a club again. It's trying to find the time. That I've used to run lunchtime clubs for recorder, but with a big three form school, we have split lunches, which again kind of makes it tricky to have all the children come at the same time because they don't lunch at the same time. But again, it's something I'm constantly reviewing. I've already got ideas for next week. I think I'm going to return and try a guitar club again. Really keen to do a school orchestra of sorts. Um, One of my passions is composing, arranging, and it's work I've done in the past. We've got the resources, and it'd be interesting to see what the uptake is and what children will like to do. Again, we'll try it. If it works, brilliant. If it doesn't, we'll try something else. And then in the summer, we'll have things like we'll have our summer affair. So we have a lovely set of jumpy jams, and we'll have a after school club. Children will learn them specifically to perform as well. I think some clubs, when there's that obvious end goal, become slightly more attractive to the children. Oh, I'm doing this because, rather than learning an instrument for an instrument's sake, which of course we love to do anyway. I think some children, when they can see the goal behind it, it's just that incentive, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree. And then it's also when you've done that and when you've achieved that, it's getting through the hump of like, oh, now I'm quitting because I've done the
Well, they've
thing that
done
I
it.
wanted to do.
Well, I've learned that instrument now. I've done it. And I've had that with year sixes. I've done guitar with them after 3 weeks. Are we still doing guitar? Yeah. Yeah. Oh, because in their mind they've done it.
Mm.
And I think that's the difference, isn't it, between learning an instrument, paying for lessons and doing it throughout your childhood and hopefully into adulthood, and trying an instrument. And we're trying to fix I know the bit in between where you learn something, but then if you want to carry it on, is trying to give them the opportunities to do that. And it's tricky, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. So we talked a lot about performance and extracurricular. I'm really interested to know a little bit more about your curriculum as well. So, like, what kind of topics you're covering, how regularly you're seeing the children, how long the lessons are, like, how's that all working?
So lesson wise, all the children get a week, sorry, one lesson a week, ranging from 40 minutes to 50 minutes. On top of that, they'll have a half hour singing lesson, sorry, singing assembly as well. So they are getting at least 40, 50, 60, 70 minutes of music a week. There are the children who will pay for lessons and some that will go to clubs. And obviously, those who go to choir, they're probably getting close to 2 hours. And you find that it's the same children as well, who have that keen
Mm.
interest. They will be in the choir, they will come to the extra bits. So every child will get music every single week. And then in terms of curriculum, so I came from secondary. It was a huge learning curve. I did my PhD in secondary music. And before that, it was freelance. I was teaching guitar and whole class instruments. So I had kind of that in my pocket, but how to teach music to children, didn't have a clue. So in the last 10 years, just as much CPD as I can possibly get. And I've effectively created my own curriculum by cherry picking. So in the last couple of years, well, more in fact, like 5, 6 years, I've come to discover things like Kadai and Orff, which I think are fantastic for our younger children in my cohort. So from receptacle nursery up to years one and into year two is heavily Kadai based. So there's lots of singing games. Effectively, we are just singing and we are moving and we're doing lots of those kind of things. As they start to get a little bit older, end of year one into year two, we'll put that into practice and they'll start to learn notation. Very basic notation, but they are learning to read music. Year two, they are learning to read music on recorders with no letter names, no help. They can just read the music. Um, and then for me, it changes as the children get older, especially into 5 and 6, which I'll go to in a minute. I found some of those particular games and songs were slightly too young for our children. It just didn't pitch right for our cohort. So the 3 and 4 in the middle is very instrumental based. So in year three, they're learning the ukulele and they get fantastic at just playing in time, playing loads of chords and singing songs. It's kind of the other bit of music rather than reading it all. Is actually, well, this is a different way of doing it. Year four, instruments, like I mentioned, they're all reading music without any help and prompts. And then year 5 and 6 goes to more topic based. So some things are cross curricular. So our year fives do a topic on disasters and it's heavily based, their geography is Asia. So our music works beautifully for music. We look at music in Asia and the pentatonic scale, and they finish with a performance to their parents all about Asia and lots of songs and music, and that's beautiful. It just fits so nice. A similar topic on West African drumming as well when they're exploring Africa in their geography. We have djembe for half a term. But I like to get as much ICT in as well because our children that there's that thing again. If they're not learning an instrument but they're interested in music, what else can I do? And it opens up a world of ICT. So our year fives have just finished off their video game music topic, which is a huge passion of mine. I play video games and I love film and video game music. So they've created music all on computers. And then they've created a game on Scratch and they've put the music into their game and they've created their own game and video game music. And it's amazing. That's gone really well. And year sixes, we look at loops and sampling and creating digital music and hip hop music, and raps and things like that. Again, topics, year six, I prepare them for secondary school. I like to try one of our biggest secondary schools. I know that it's heavily contemporary, so there's a lot of rock and pop that we're expected to do either guitar or drums or keyboard or singing. So I put that into my primary curriculum. We look at the guitar and we do a lot of keyboard work just to prepare them for that stage. And obviously, as they get older, they get opinionated and they like their pop music. So I try my best to cater for that as well. And yeah, like I said, I've just kind of I've been lucky that I've had advocacy as well. I've learned what works and what doesn't work, what the children's interests are. And it also means that if one year I want to try something different, I can. Yeah. So I've talked a lot, haven't I?
Yeah,
I'll
no,
take a
it's
breath now.
fascinating. It's fascinating. And I'm really glad actually that you started talking about secondary because I was thinking that was in my mind to ask you, like, whether you think you're at an advantage having come from secondary in terms of like creating that transition pathway and those transition links, and whether there are formal transition links between you and your secondary colleagues, or whether you're just kind of using your own experience and your own knowledge to sort of set children up for whatever is going to happen to them in the future.
It is a mix of both, actually. So, yeah, obviously, I spent a long time teaching teenagers anyway, and in my secondary, I got a really good idea of, especially those first 3 years in secondary school, the kind of things that they do. And to be honest, I don't think that's changed much. It's still very similar topics and different approaches to it. And like I said, trying my best to get those children prepared. And actually, we do get nice feedback from the secondary schools. They know which children have come from my school, and that's not me sounding big-headed. It's just that they know that these children are gonna know certain things or they'll have the skills. So, oh, you can already do that thing on the guitar. You understand what that means? Yeah, we've done a term of it. But also, I do try to, have communication with the secondary school. So one of them, I literally just asked them, "What is your year 7 to 9 curriculum?" As simple as that. And they sent me this lovely, just a PDF file. It's just a lovely picture, 7, 8, and 9, and all the things they did. And that was all I needed really. And then I could just, you know, see how my year 6 kind of summer term is just going to smoothly transition into their first year 7. And I think it does work. It's worked really well. We've got another secondary school. They're coming up to do a some workshops this week actually on musicals. So they've just put on a musical, Frozen. They're one of the 10 schools, I think, in the country have had the license to do Frozen. So they're putting on their show, and at the same time, they're going to come up and do some workshops with our year 3. So I think the secondary schools are busy. Everyone's busy, but if you can find that pocket of time to make that connection, I think that's important as well, because those children will meet their future music teachers as well.
Yeah, and I guess I mean I'm assuming where you're based, like there's a smaller number of secondary schools to choose from, kind of just geographically. So probably you're able to make much stronger links than say like where I am in the Midlands. Kids could be going to any one of 12, 13 different schools.
Yeah, no,
So
definitely.
you can see.
There's a kind of 2 or 3 to 4 main ones, really. Yeah. So I from that respect, definitely easier.
Definitely easy. Well, you've got to take your wins where you can get them, haven't you?
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, you mentioned about your role kind of coordinating the network for your schools. And I wondered whether you could kind of talk me through the sort of things that you do with that and how you're supporting other schools and how they're getting on with music.
Yeah, so I'm the Music Network League for the academy chain I work with, and I think there's around 30 primary schools. So around 4 times a year we'll meet online, and essentially it's an opportunity to talk about what music looks like in all the different schools, and I oversee that. So I get a kind of an insight um, into how music is managed, and it's interesting that since the national plan came out a few years ago and we've got the model music curriculum, there's been this um, big push. There has been a positive push for music to be better basically in primary schools, but the stories are still varied. They're hugely varied as to how much time children are getting, the reality, how much time they're getting, whether some schools are still alternating. Some children aren't having lessons every single term, and that's still happening. But I think in our academy, we're lucky that it seems to be fairly consistent across the board. We've still got a lot of schools that do rely on bought-in schemes, of course, and I think they're there for a reason. I think one of the reasons they're there for, in totally honest, is that. Um, new ECTs are coming in and they're not trained. It's as simple as that. And if you're not trained in something, then you can't teach it, or you can't teach it particularly well. And I think that's one of the gaps that isn't being filled at the moment. So there's almost this reliant on the schemes, and the schemes are out there for all topics, and they're fantastic, a lot of them. But I think one of the main reasons they're out there and they're being used so much is because we've got a lot of teachers who have perhaps had, I don't know, my wife, she did her ECT about 3 years ago, and I think she said she had a day of music,
Mhm.
which probably equated to around about 3 to 4 hours. That's not enough to teach music to a high quality from ages, 5 to 10, 11. Um, so it's interesting. I've gone off on a tangent slightly, but these are the things that I pick up from speaking to other schools. We can all share what we're doing and all share the lovely music we're doing, but at the end of the day, every time I ask, what is it you need? It's CPD and it's
Mm.
training. Of course, I don't see them all the time, but I try to help when I can. This week we were lucky to get together in London for a day, and that was just the best day ever because we were all there and we could just do things for the whole day. And this is how you teach 4-year-olds. This is how you teach 8-year-olds, which a lot of teachers just won't know. So I think, yeah, one of the biggest things I discovered from that, and networking, speaking to people online, it's just training, training, training is what's needed.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I take your point about what happens in universities, and it was a similar situation for me. And I've got literally a certificate that says I specialised in primary music in my PGCE, and I had two lectures, and the second one they asked me to lead. So,
Wow. You should have another certificate.
So yeah, and it's similar. We know that this is the case. We know it's a similar thing. And you may know in the previous national plan, there was a pilot project for getting additional training into PGCEs, and it was trialed by a couple of universities, I think, and it went really, really well. And then it just got dropped, and nobody really knows why it got dropped. And I think it's the biggest failing of that initial plan actually, because it's the one thing had it been rolled out nationally that could have done the most to solve all the problems we're having in primary schools. Once you get into being a teacher, you've got limited time, even if there's budget for training, even if you're enthusiastic about it, even if your SLT want to let you out, you've got so much other stuff to do. Having the headspace to be able to do it properly is, I think, really tricky. So things like network meetings and trainings and all the things that music hubs are doing and lead schools are doing to try and kind of plug that gap, I think is really important. And you mentioned the schemes, of course, and I think your attitude towards schemes is absolutely right. And sometimes, people are really snotty about schemes. And I think, well, what's the alternative? If
Mm,
you don't have a
exactly.
scheme, it's not like some magical music is just going to come from nowhere. The alternative is nobody teaches music. So, like, meet me in the middle somewhere. And as you may know, and listeners may know, I've written for several schemes, one big name in particular. And I get halfway through saying this, and I'm like, should I check my contract? Am I allowed to say this? But my favorite thing is when people start telling me about the changes that they've made to my schemes, because I feel like that means you've got to the stage where you're in control and you know what you're doing, and you've got irritated by the way I'm doing things, or whatever scheme you're using, and you're like, why is it like that? It would be better to be like this, and that is the key turning point. That shows that you know what you're doing and you're ready to fly then. So I think schemes are really useful for that initial phase. They're also useful, particularly for music, just because of all the resources and stuff. If you have to resource your own scheme, as you all know, it takes ages. You're in the lucky position where you could probably just knock out a few tunes to learn in the classroom with your composing skills. But it's a big job. So they're really great from that point of view. But then also you want to feel like teachers are bespoking them and they're taking them away and they're pick and mixing them and they're putting their own stamp on them eventually, which I think if you use them in the right way, I think there's a real possibility of that happening. And I'm
But I don't
sure.
know when they'll have the time to do that. And that's the
Mm,
funny thing, isn't it? And you could have this argument for any topic because all primary school teachers are expected to teach every topic to the same quality. Um, but 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 things like music that you might not have grown up with, that's the other thing. We're assuming that everyone's grown up with music, might not have at all, and chances are that your music lead is the person who might have played recorder in primary school. They might have been, it might be a practicing musician now. But you've got, people like myself who are in a fortunate position to deliver the whole music. But and I don't want to lose my job over this. But as a result, I'm de-skilling other teachers
Mhm.
because they're not actually learning it anyway. But I guess the flip side of that is, well, they've done their ECT and they're not in any better position at all. And I think again, bridging that gap is finding the consistency in training. If the training is there, it's got to be consistent as well. Because if your music lead changes every year, which a lot of them do, then that's just that whole year's worth of training and insight. Because it's it's something to train a teacher or teachers to be able to do something, but then for that teacher to then pass it all on, potentially every year it can't be consistent. I don't think it can ever reach a high level because you're constantly just at base level. And I think that's one of the biggest struggles with music. I think other people are probably more confident with, foundation subjects because just as a general knowledge, they might have a good general knowledge of geography or history, but music's quite specific, isn't it? And I guess you could
Mm.
make the same argument with PE as well. I think there's kind of similar issues. Hence why so many agencies are stepping in and doing the work for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm always really surprised that there don't seem to be that many agencies out there doing MFL, because I would have thought that's, if you've suddenly got to teach French or Spanish,
Mm.
and you don't speak it, I would have thought that would be equally difficult to, music and PE. But I
Yeah,
mean, there
yeah.
are people going into schools as specialists, but it doesn't seem to be like as big an industry as the music PPA cover and the PE PPA cover, but it's all part of the course, isn't it? Unless you happen to learn that language in school, you are going to
Exactly.
struggle to teach it. Unless you happen to learn about music in school, you are going to struggle to a certain extent to teach it. And particularly, I suppose the notation aspect is the thing that teachers worry about the most. I often teachers will say to me, "Oh, I can't teach music because I can't even read music," and the use of the word "even" is really interesting. Like it's some kind of terrible failing on their behalf, as opposed to just a skill that they didn't acquire because they were acquiring different skills. And it takes
But
quite a long time to unpick that, I think.
yeah, but I was having that chat with someone the other day, and if you look at the curriculum, you could teach the entire primary curriculum without teaching music. Like you don't even have to. 50% of the musicians in the world do not read
Mhm.
music. It's just one way of doing it. But yeah, it's that fear, isn't it? Oh, music's this, I can't do that. Well,
Yeah,
um,
it's a special
it's
thing,
a
and
special thing
sometimes,
that other people do.
yeah, and
Yeah.
sometimes I worry about like specialists like us, whether we're inadvertently causing other teachers to feel, the more we're around teaching, the more they're like, oh, music is a special thing that only special people can do. And then I wonder if that filters down to the children at all, and whether they're like, oh, you have to be a particular type of
Mm.
person. And I mean, I know you'll be the same as me, that you obviously in your classroom, you're modeling that music is for everything and it's inclusive, but whether somewhere in the back of their minds, they're sort of like, oh, that's the special stuff. And if I haven't learnt to play an instrument, outside of school, I'm not the special person, so music's not for me, kind of
But
thing.
yeah, but
Um,
like you said, but that is the case, isn't it? Because if you can't pay or your family can't pay for a music lesson, then it isn't for me. It's for other people, and
mm,
that's the tough. That I think that's the tough one, isn't it? We're constantly advocating that anyone can do anything, but when it comes to music, anyone can learn an instrument. Yes, of course they can, but can they? Because you've got to have the money. Like there will be children out there who are self-taught and self-teach a lot. And actually, that's one of the things we're finding in our school is we have so many children who it's lovely. They consider themselves a pianist or a keyboardist because at home they use YouTube and they teach themselves. And we've got some really good. We've got one lad in particular. I'm no pianist, but his positioning could probably be better, but if you weren't looking at his fingers, oh my goodness, he's phenomenal, you know?
mhm.
But he's had his own passion and time and energy to just do it himself. Not every child is like that. But yeah, no, I think that is interesting because as we can talk the talk and talk the talk, but what children are constantly seeing is the same particular person teaching the music and the other people who play the music. And
Mm.
with the orchestra we had today, though, it was quite nice. We had a 17-year old lad on cello who was just phenomenal, learning at 5, and another girl at 16 on trumpet. So, and I think that's what we need, especially when we have visits. It's lovely. You get the local orchestra and you get the brass band, but usually in the middle of the day, it will be the adults who don't work anymore, so they're slightly older, and so children won't see other children. And going back to the secondary school, one of the best things you can do is get the secondary school kind of year 10, 11s, 12, 13s, their pop and rock bands, get them in and play to the children. That's one of the highlights we have for the year, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's so true. And it can be, I think, as rewarding for your year 10 and 11s to
Oh yeah.
come into, especially if it's going back to their old primary school and showing
Mm.
off a bit. That can be as interesting for them as it is for the children who are meant to be kind of the target audience for it. And yeah, I think you're right. I think it's showing them role models that are not so far removed from them that they can't
Yeah.
imagine ever getting there.
Mm.
What's the phrase? If you can't see it, you can't be it.
Mm.
And when you're 7, if you're looking at someone who's 45, I mean, they seem like a completely, they seem like they're about to drop dead, don't they? Let's face it. When
Yeah.
so you do need those younger role models. And I think that's true of secondary as well. I think when you get in as year 7, you need to see it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? You need to see like those older kids who are really talented and really kind of committed to music, but at the same time, that can for some children be like, oh, I'd never be like that.
Mm.
It's another barrier, isn't it? So it's so hard to kind of, yeah, get it to be inclusive and inspiring and not get it to be this thing of reinforcing that idea of only talented people do music and only some people are musical and all that
And
sort of
we tried
stuff.
to do that with performing. We make sure that every year group performs so it becomes a normal.
Mm,
Obviously, it's always a special occasion, but you're just expected to perform. This is just what we do. And, they'll slowly, it's nice when you hear a child refer to themselves as a musician,
mhm,
because a lot of them don't. Even though when we talk about, well, what is a musician? A musician is somebody who plays an instrument. What do? You play an instrument and you perform to people, but they still don't see themselves as a musician. It's like something else. But I think if you can get that into your kind of day to day or your routine of your music curriculum, that performing is part of this, I think they will start to see themselves as musicians. You're just on the other side. You're watching musicians, and then when you're doing it to the adults, hopefully they can see the links there.
mhm. I was wondering actually, because you're a man in a primary school, which is a very exciting thing, and you're not a head
We've got
teacher. I
loads
mean,
of men
why?
in our primary schools.
I'm wondering about singing and boys singing, and whether, like, you've got boys refusing to sing, or whether you're keeping them singing like all the way through up and into year 6, and if you are, whether you think that's because you're kind of a role model for them, and because you're doing it, they're happy to do it.
That's a good question. You've always got the typical year sixes who get to that age and they become, quite self-conscious. I think that's what a lot of it is. So I think disregarding that, I think that's just an age and a maturity thing that's happening. Um, I don't see many boys now not singing because, I don't know, it's not cool or they don't want to. That's quite rare. There'd always
Mhm,
be children, girls and boys, who just they either don't enjoy it for whatever reasons, they're quite, I don't know, insecure about it, they get anxious about it. Um, but on a whole, no, I think it's especially in the choirs, we've got more boys coming. We've got more girls. I think that's tends to be normal. There's certainly more boys coming, and I don't know. I never thought of the fact that it's because it's me doing a singing assembly. I guess traditionally um, yeah, up and down the country is more likely going to be a female teacher, certainly a female um, singer, maybe. I've never really, because I've just done it. all the
Mm,
time. I'm not in a position where I'm seeing other people do it. It's always just been me, so I haven't really thought about it. But yeah, it could be a factor. I don't know.
mm. I mean, I just ask because that my experience of kind of trying to get year six boys to sing is very much kind of they're like, oh, I'm a man, I can't
Hmm.
sing that high sort of thing, and you have a little chuckle inwardly, and it just kind of
But then you
okay.
ask them who they listen to,
Mm,
and it's men who
mhm.
generally have, a lot of pop star, especially rock stars. They've got
Really high
really high
voices, yeah,
voices. I'm
yeah.
I'm quite deep, so I struggle to sing along to most pop songs. George Ezra's my kind of thing because he's like a baritone or tenor like me. But for a lot of boys, again, it's they don't see the link. They
Mm,
listen to men singing all the time, yet they think it's a girly thing to do. Again, I think it's an age thing and a maturity thing, but yeah, no, it's interesting to think about that. But no, I think we do have a lot of very enthusiastic boy singers, definitely.
fantastic. That's really good to hear. I think the other thing I would like to ask you about as well is like composing and improvising within the curriculum because we talked an awful lot about kind of performing and singing in instruments and with your obvious talent for being a composer yourself, like how are you approaching composing and improvising in the curriculum? How much of, the curriculum time is taken up with that? How central is it to the approach that you're taking?
I I'm still trying to figure it out, believe it or not. The timing and when to do it and how to do it. The reason I say that is because from a very young age, I'm always in the nursery and reception. I'm always getting children to try and sing on their own and make things up. Because essentially, before any composing, you are improvising. I am. I'm noodling on a keyboard or noodling on a guitar, and then I'm going to the composing bit. So improvising is always happening. It's the first thing that happens anyway. So from a very young age, we will learn very simple songs, like dead simple songs, and then each child will have a turn, and they're just changing the action. So that most of them are improvising on the spot. There's slight pre-thought to it, but there is to most improvising, to be honest.
Mm,
So that is normal for a lot of our children. They're having to think of something on the spot quite a lot, whether it's just being making silly voices, silly noises. They do that a lot. When you kind of get into the middle of the curriculum, it's then quite hard because you ask a child to compose and they don't really know how to. They know how to make something silly up, but then it's linking to making it a kind of a structured thing. So I tend to hold off a little bit and give them like the skills to develop. So if they're playing, if I've given them a xylophone, for example, and I've suddenly asked them to write a piece of music, not an entire piece of music, just to compose something. Well, some of them can't actually play the thing yet. They haven't developed the motor skills. So you're asking them to write something. It's like it can't physically make the sound yet. They don't know where the notes are really, really well. I can compose and improvise because I know where all the notes are, so I can do
mhm,
it quite quickly. But you need to have those skills first, kind of those physical skills. So I do hold off a little bit. For example, in year three in the ukulele, we've got to a point now where we spent a couple of weeks composing their own blues songs. But the reason they could do it so successfully is because they didn't need to think about the chords.
mhm,
They already knew the chords without looking. Otherwise, if you asked them to do it all in one go, there's so much processing going on. You're asking them to write a song in this case, but hang on, how do you play that C? I can't remember the F. And then, no, it's just too much for the brain to take. So I kind of get them to develop the skills on the instrument first, so that becomes the second thought, if that makes sense. Because
mhm,
then you can put all your brain power into that thing you're trying to do. And by the time they get to year five and sixes, so in year five, we talked about the Asia thing, we do a whole year group composition, but in three sections. So we have each class. And in this case, we composed a piece of music. It was more of a soundscape to do with disasters. So we had the calm before the storm, and then we had the earthquake, and then we had the tsunami. So the music, as I said, was more soundscapey, but they didn't need to think about the physicalities of playing the instruments. They could put all their thought into what I want it to sound like. And of course, as they get older into years five and six, again, try and get them right, write something on a keyboard. I can't really play the keyboard. So you're going to really struggle to write something if you can't do that first. So yeah, I think I'll time it so I know that they're proficient enough to be able to write and perform something that they've created themselves um, successfully. I don't want them to just, oh, I've made this thing up, and then they come to perform it and they, oh, I did go a little bit wrong. Hang on, try again. Um, does that make sense? I think
Totally.
if you know what I
Totally.
mean.
Yeah. I think we've all been in the situation where, you do a group composition and then they come and perform it and it's absolutely nothing like what they'd sort of agreed. There's always one that goes rogue. Um,
Right, and there always is, yeah. And I've had it, at younger ages, you ask a child to, everyone loves Peter and the Wolf or Carnival and the Animals, kind of those standards, which probably will be for the next 100 years. And I might ask the child, play some music to represent an animal. And it's all very, very basic. But that's what you'll get in return, isn't it? And I think it's just having those what's the word I'm looking for? Expectations. So
mhm.
depending on the age and depending on what you want from them, you're only gonna ever get back what you've given and what they've learned. So yeah, I think it's having those expectations, but understanding that a child can only can only give what they get. Yeah, so there's quite a long-winded answer, but I think that kind of made sense in my head. They need the skills in order to be able to do it in the first place. But I still, lots of opportunities for composition.
Yeah, and as you say, I mean, improvising is something that you can access directly very, very quickly, isn't it? And a lot of, I think, compositional work, particularly in Key Stage 1, tends to be improvisatory
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
nature. I think a lot of non-specialist colleagues, they will often say composing is something that they don't know how to do and they're frightened of. And there's an argument to say, well, it is just making stuff up, and actually, you can't get it wrong because you made it up. Whereas if you're trying to learn a song, you could get that wrong, and that could be really
Yeah.
embarrassing. But as you say, you get to a point, and then actually, if it's going to be worthwhile, and if it's going to be meaningful, and if it's going to be, actually developing your skills of expression, you need to have those basic skills in order to be able to, yeah, to work with the instruments. I think one of the struggles that I've encountered in many schools is if you want them to make up, say you've got glockenspiels or xylophones, you want them to make up a melody, instantly they're asking, can I have a piece of paper and a pen? And they want to just write down random letter names and then play them, which is not composing. Composing is creating a tune that you like and then writing down the letters afterwards to remind yourself which ones to play, and getting the kind of the flip to that is quite tricky. And I find sometimes working with non-specialists, getting them to understand that as well, quite understandably, because if you've not learnt before, you don't really know. You know that letter names are attached to notes, but you might not necessarily know that you've got to do it orally. It's not just like write down random letters and see what comes out. And it's the same often, I think, for sometimes people say, oh, we've written a song. And what they actually mean is they've written new lyrics to an existing song, which is
Oh
not
yeah.
composing. um, and again, if you've not been trained, how would you know? Why would you know? You would think, oh, I've written the words. A song is words. I've written the words. We've written a song. We've composed. So there's definitely, I think, work to be done both with our pupils and also, for colleagues who maybe haven't had the level of training that we have into actually how to properly compose and what it really
Yeah.
means to
And
to compose.
and again, the time element. If you're seeing them for 40 minutes, it's not very long. Um, you might want to continue it next week. So I can't record everybody because I've got to teach one class and immediately teach the next class, immediately teach the next class. If I recorded everybody, I'll have around 5 minutes of teaching time. And it's so for a lot of the composition activities I'll do, they will be short. They'll be short and to the point so they can actually achieve something within the lesson. Because yeah, it would be lovely, right? For 6 weeks, we're going to compose something. They're not going to remember, even if they've written it down. A lot of them won't actually remember. So there's always a step back. But then I think the biggest barrier, even for me, with my lovely big room, is noise level. We've got a lot of
Mm,
children who, me myself as well, who just cannot. concentrate, understandably, and especially instruments like, I mean, xylophones are beautiful. I don't know what happens in America or Australia, but they have the funding for these beautiful collections of xylophones and marimbas, which are so nice and nice on the ear. But chances are you've probably got glockenspiels, and I think of all the instruments that I teach or use, they go straight to the eardrum and then straight through the other side, and they are really hard work when you've got it's balancing. Do you just give 30 children, right, off you go, and then it would be very hard for anybody to create anything in that. Um, so yeah, it's just that the management of that lesson, noise, plus the time, plus the expectations. I think you just got to be a realist. And
Mm.
like you said, make it meaningful, make it worthwhile, not a box ticking exercise. Oh, we did composing. Well, you spent half an hour attempting to create a melody, and I think that, but that's the life of doing it in primary school. If you don't have breakout rooms, you don't have those things. That's what happens, isn't it? And choosing
Yep.
your instruments, like I said, if that's going to be your instrument, think about how you're going to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm totally with you on the glockenspiels. And I had no idea until I started using glockenspiels with 30 children at the same time. You'd think that was what a lovely tinkly fairy-like instrument that it. No.
Rubber, rubber beaters. I said that to someone the other day because a lot of them will come with plastic beaters. Like, oh, just get rubber beaters, and then at least you've got a slightly softer sound. But and a lot of children, I've noticed since post-COVID. Not that I don't think it's got anything to do with COVID, but I'm sure there's kind of implications of it. More and more children are sensitive to sound.
Mhm.
I've never seen so many children with ear defenders and
Mhm.
things like that. Literally never in my life. It's just become a thing in the last 3, 4, 5 years. That there are a lot of children who just struggle, not
Mhm.
just with the sound and the timbre, but volume, and just being overwhelmed. And again, that's another thing to think about when you're delivering these kind of lessons.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess I have one more question for you, which is, what's your favorite thing about your job?
Oh, good question. Um, I think it's, and not to sound kind of egotistical, is seeing the impact I've made, but not on every single child, because I'm a realist as well. It's not going to be every single child. Of all the children you teach, 1% maybe might go on to become a musician. And that's not me being a pessimist. That's just realistic. In the 20 odd years I've been doing it, I've got a girl who must be in her mid 20s now. She's doing particularly well as a kind of she's a punk guitarist, fantastic. And that's brilliant. That makes it all worthwhile for me. But I think, yeah, getting to year 6, seeing the children perform at the end of the levers. A couple of them might say, "Oh, your music was my favorite subject." It's like, "Oh, brilliant." A couple of them say, "I'm really looking forward to secondary school because then I get to do this." It's like, excellent. You've helped to grow that passion and just give them what they need in order to carry on, whether they're going to be able to afford it or not. The passion's there. I was taught trumpet when I was 9, but it's the only lessons that I was ever paid for. Everything else I was self-taught. I was just lucky. I got to 18, I picked up a guitar and I could do it myself. And a lot of the children I teach, that's how I see kind of their musical futures. A lot of them won't be able to afford it, but they do have the passion for it. And if I've impacted that in some way, then yeah, that makes me smile.
Well, that is an absolutely lovely way to end this chat. Thank you so much, David. I know that our listeners will have got a lot from that and have be buzzing with ideas and things they want to try in their schools, including maybe trying to persuade their head teachers to let them do choir during lesson time.
Yeah. It's a
So,
lesson. It's still a lesson.
absolutely, absolutely. So, thank you very much for your time today and for being a guest on Primary Music in Conversation.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that episode with David Gray. I was really fascinated to hear about all the different instruments that he's got happening in his school, and just the whole approach, and the fact that his SLT is so supportive and allowing choir to take place during curriculum time to attract more children. It seems like a really kind of positive attitude towards music in his school, and I'm sure his pupils are getting the most out of his expertise. If you've enjoyed this chat and you want to hear more, you can have a look underneath the video if you're on YouTube, and you can see how to subscribe and also further information about other episodes. And if you are listening on a podcast app, in the podcast notes there will be similar information for you. Primary Music in Conversation is presented by Dr. Liz Stafford, edited by Kay Charlton, and produced by Music Education Solutions.